What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and the virtual March Madness tournament here simulating on 2K21. The last two episodes they recapped the first round. Let's hop into the round of 32, shall we? As we highlight the number one overall seeds region, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. They made quick work of App State, and Oklahoma, they won a nail-biter against the 9th seeded Missouri Tigers. So 1 versus 8, two games that the virtual March Madness got correct. So let's hop in, grab some popcorn, because today it's going to be a very interesting episode. A lot of Cinderella teams really making their own story, and that's really the fun about a virtual tournament. We get to see smaller schools make their own name for themselves. So as we hop in, Oklahoma's keeping it close down the stretch. They cut it to 9 with about 4 minutes left to play. But Gonzaga, the heavy favorites in this tournament on ESPN's Bracket Challenge, they were the number one team picked for the tournament, including myself. Came up short on that pick. But so far so good for the Gonzaga Bulldogs. They recently just took the L in real life, of course, the Baylor Bears. Trying to right their wrongs here in the tournament. They look just as dominant here in the virtual March Madness. And we saw in this game for Gonzaga, very impressive. They were able to spread out the attack this much. Meanwhile, Davion Harmon, who was a hero in the first round game, he only shot 8 of 24. Now the 5 versus 4, these two teams will fight for a chance to take down the number 1 seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs. Virginia, the 4th seed, and Creighton, the 5th seed, and both these teams had some trouble in the first round. Creighton was on the ropes by UC Santa Barbara, much like in real life, and Ohio, they made it close with Virginia, but unlike real life, they couldn't pull out the upset. And just on that basis alone, it's going to be a pretty interesting matchup here tonight, and not only on paper, but on the hardwood. We're seeing it's a very competitive ball game. 87 apiece is Marcus Zagorowski, and Creighton will have the first possession coming out of simulating, but Zagorowski turns it over, and on the other direction, he will be a little over aggressive on Kahi Clark, and Zagorowski has fouled out, and he was Creighton's best performer in that Ohio game, a big reason why they did not go home early. So Creighton, the 5 seed, will have to find some way to get it done without their best offensive player. Going inside will be UVA, Joey Hauser, the transfer from Marquette. His brother plays for Michigan State, no good on the turnaround J there. So Creighton will go with a backup point guard here as he controls the tempo. Bounce pass inside, we have Denzel Mahoney, who will be clobbered by Zam Hauser. And Mahoney had a good one in this one because UVA, they just don't seem to have anybody as physically gifted as Mahoney. So Mahoney with a perfect pair of free throws there, 89-87. UVA will try for the tie again. Hauser fading away off his back foot, and that'll go for the Marquette transfer. 22 points for him today. 89 apiece as we reach the 60-second threshold here in this ball game. And now Creighton, after those free throws by Mahoney, they're going to sub in their second point guard. And now they're going to go back to Mahoney, fade away. The rim's not very friendly to him there. Now still knotted up at 89 apiece as UVA will take over, and Beekman, who also subs in for the Cavs in replacement for Kahi Clark, who will take a quick breather, and he will dunk one down. So backup point guards for both teams down the stretch as Creighton, they will sub in their third point guard in as many possessions. As he navigates to the right side of the court, bounce pass inside to Mahoney, once again trying to post up Hauser. Much less skinny is Hauser, as he has trouble holding down the interior there, and Mahoney will tie it back up at 91 apiece. Only 2 games into the round of 32, and we're going to be in for a show-stopping finish as that jump shot by Mahoney will force overtime, and Creighton will jump back in with 58 seconds left to go. They got a 2-point lead plus the possession. So Marcus Zagorowski standing on the sideline, Creighton still holding their own and then some, as Mahoney will take it and put down the layup with a chance to add one more at the charity stripe. Very impressive drive there as Mahoney's coming up very clutch here for the Blue Jays of Creighton. The 5th seeded Jays, they will be up by 5 if he can knock this one down. Unsuccessful, however. Jay Huff pulls in another rebound. He's got double digits in that category tonight. So coming back the other way, no Kahi Clark once again for UVA, another backup point guard for Virginia as they go inside to Hauser. Nothing but net on the fadeaway. UVA, they will pull within 2, and eventually when Bishop can get in this inbounds pass, a little scary there if you're a Jays fan, that will send Mitch Ballock to the free throw line, and he's not only one of the best free throw shooters in this field, he's one of the best free throw shooters in the Big East Conference. So Ballock with a chance to put Creighton over the edge, and he misses the first one. We saw Ballock miss a couple big free throws in the Santa Barbara game as well. They still managed to hold off the Gauchos. The second one drops, however. So UVA with potentially one last possession as the inbound will go to Hauser, as he will be the one at the controls here with 32 seconds left. As Denzel Mahoney guards him closely, Hauser will receive a screen from Jay Huff, navigates to his right for the tie. No good. A good look there for Hauser, and they'll get this ball around to the backup point guard. He will knock down 2 of 2, and Creighton holds on for a chance to knock off the #1 overall seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs. You saw 34 points there from Ballock. Mahoney with a couple huge shots. They were able to combat the loss of Zagorowski. A very impressive performance there. A nail-biter one here in the second game of the round of 32. Very impressive by the Jays, and that's a matchup that the computer simulation gets right. So the first Sweet 16 matchup decided is picked correctly by the virtual tournament, and the virtual March Madness tournament can make it 3 in a row. Sweet 16 teams picked correctly if they can take USC over Kansas. A very interesting matchup just because USC, they blew out Drake in the first round of the virtual tournament, yet Kansas had some trouble with Eastern Washington. EWU made that game competitive all the way through, and USC got off to a very quick start, but Kansas in the second half wiping the floor with the Trojans. And this was a game I got right in the real tournament. I had Kansas and USC, and then eventually I also had USC winning. But not so fast here in the virtual tournament. The Jayhawks take this game by 13 points, and will have a chance pending the next game to try to make the Elite Eight. So, very interesting here. Unfortunately, the computer cannot get it right. Ochai Agbaji, he had 27 against Evan and Isaiah Mobley. Meanwhile, the big twins inside, they still combined for 27, shooting 20 for 41 from the floor, but True Peterson had a tough night tonight, only 4 points. Now, the 7-seeded Oregon Ducks against the 15-seeded Grand Canyon Antelopes. An already solidified Cinderella. Maybe they could be the Oral Roberts of the virtual tournament. And it'd be pretty interesting because if Oregon makes this game, that'll be another Sweet 16 team picked correctly by the virtual tournament. But while we're here highlighting Grand Canyon, a guy I want to have a little moment for is Oscar Freyer. Unfortunately, if you haven't heard the news, a couple days after Grand Canyon lost in real life to Iowa, this young man passed away in a car accident. Very sad news. And it almost puts things in perspective when things like this happen, because this is a guy who I didn't think much of when I made him. You know, I had to make a lot of teams for this virtual tournament, and it's kind of crazy. I just made this guy the other day in 2K, and a couple days later, he is unfortunately moved on to the next life. So a college kid who wasn't much older than me, it really puts things in perspective just how quickly things can change and how somebody can leave us so quickly. So rest in peace, Oscar Freyer. And as we move on to the tournament, Grand Canyon, look at this. They were actually in the lead by 3 at halftime. And Oregon, though, they shut the door pretty quick here in the final 5 minutes of regulation. But Grand Canyon, they had some Oregon fans, I bet, biting their fingernails. They made this thing very close, a lot more close than the final score would have depicted. 94-71, so 3 out of 4 here in the first region of the tournament that the virtual March Madness picks correctly. Very interesting, as the Oregon Ducks will go on to face the Kansas Jayhawks for a chance at the Elite Eight. Meanwhile, Mikey Dixon, who was a hero last round against Iowa, he had 24, and Oscar Freyer, gone but not forgotten. He was scoreless, but at the same token, 2 steals, played great defense without even tacking on 1 foul to his box score. So he played very good defense against one of the best offensive clubs in the Pac-12. Rest in peace, Oscar Freyer. As we move on to the next region, we see the 1-seeded Michigan Wolverines against the 9th-seeded St. Bonaventure Bonnies. Very interesting matchup here because St. Bonaventure, they made quick work of LSU in the first round, blew them out. And meanwhile, we all know Isaiah Levers is active, healthy for the virtual tournament, so Michigan has had, or will have, a lot higher standards and expectations here in the virtual tournament. But St. Bonaventure, wow. In the final 5 minutes of the first half, they outscored Michigan 26-10 and would ride that momentum to a, let's see when I stop the simulating, 7-point lead with 20 seconds left to go. So we've seen a couple shockers. I mean, Michigan's counterpartner in the Big Ten, Iowa, of course, fell to Grand Canyon in the first round. And we see Michigan trying to fire up some shots here at the end of the game to no avail, as the Michigan Wolverines, the first #1 seed to go home early, even with Isaiah Livers, Kyle Lofton and his St. Bonaventure Bonnies did not care for that at all. 81-74, St. Bonaventure will move on to the next round. Definitely an all-time shocker in this one. Lofton, he had a great game against LSU and continues here with 21 against the Wolverines. Very impressive performances here all across the board for St. Bonaventure. Lofton was helped out, 19 points here, 15 points there, and a very impressive win for the Atlantic 10's representative here in March Madness. And Isaiah Livers still at 19, and it's funny because the only guy who really struggled for the Wolverines was Hunter Dickinson, who's been really lighting the world on fire. Been very impressed with him in Big Ten play. But everyone else played well. It's just sometimes when a team's hot, you can't really do much. So the 5-seeded Colorado Buffaloes against the 13-seeded UNC Greensboro Spartans will have a chance to take on one of the Cinderellas here in the tournament, of course St. Bonaventure. McKinley Wright was key in Colorado's win as they blew out 12-seeded Georgetown, which was actually the most picked upset of the first round in ESPN's Bracket Challenge. Very interesting. And speaking of upsets, Greensboro is trying to make it 2 in a row as they took down Florida State in the first round, and they got Colorado all knotted up here at 62 apiece. And this was my mistake. I accidentally simmed a play. Greensboro scored. So with the possession, Colorado down a basket, and excuse me, I forgot Greensboro's their seating there at the bottom left for the second straight game, but McKinley Wright unsuccessful on the layup there, perfectly defended by Hunter. The Greensboro point guards that go inside, back out to the Southern Conference's Player of the Year, Isaiah Miller, who was a star in the upset win over the Seminoles. And despite being one of the best players in the entire field, Isaiah Miller is actually below average from the free throw stripe, only shooting 67% here in his junior year, and the first one will not go down. Miller unsuccessful, and 2 free throws there, of course, could have made it a 2-possession game, but instead Greensboro will have to hope for the best results here on the second free throw and still have to lock down with 39 seconds left to go. Miller will knock down the second one, 65-62. We're under 35 seconds to play here, folks, and McKinley Wright and his Colorado Buffaloes will try to go for the quick 2 as he receives a screen, and this one is perfectly defended by Hayden Koval, the Greensboro big guy, and McKinley Wright unsuccessful, getting locked down here. Both free throw or layup attempts rather. Now stepping to the line will be the big fella on UNC Greensboro. And this is Abdul Salam, who's actually a reserve player for Greensboro. He's got some big minutes here down the stretch, but still unable to close the door on the Seminoles. A couple missed free throws, but the second one cannot drop through either. Man, we've seen a lot of missed free throws here early on here in the tournament in the first 2 rounds, which has left the door open for some teams to make some comebacks as Colorado tries to do the same here. McKinley Wright is swatted away, but he regains his own miss, and they'll work it back inside to him, a Baby J, to cut it within 2. So Colorado down but not out, as Wright makes it 1 for 3 here in the final minute of the ball game. Can Greensboro finally knock down some free throws? Well, they'll send Miller back to the line in hopes that he can push Greensboro over the edge, and he makes 1 but not the second, so Colorado was still a chance. As here comes Bartholomew, as he'll give this one up to Jariah Horn with 3 seconds left. 2 seconds, he'll step back for the tie, missing. And how about UNC Greensboro, the highest seed to make the Sweet 16 here in the virtual March Madness tournament? 66-64, the Spartans advance, knocking off 2 power conference opponents in their path. Angelo Allegri, he led the way for Greensboro, and even though Isaiah Miller didn't shoot the best, he still hit some free throws, and he had a very good supporting cast around him. Hayden Koval with a huge forced miss on McKinley Wright down the stretch. And as we turn over to the Colorado Buffalo side of things, McKinley Wright had 19, and he shot pretty well, but missed two very important layups there at the end. And Jeriah Horn unfortunately cannot knock down the mid-range jump shot to force OT. So this is a battle of two games that the virtual March Madness got right. They did have Abilene Christian beating Texas surprisingly, and even though I messed up the playing game, I predicted Michigan State. Obviously, I didn't get that one right. They did have the 11 seed from this region advancing. So the 11 versus 14 seed here in this region is predicted correctly by the virtual tournament, and Michigan State, even though they blew the playing game in the real life tournament against UCLA, they got a chance to right their wrongs, but ACU will not make it as easy as one might think here heading into the tournament. So, only down by 2 as Michigan State steps to the line for 2 very important free throws. And towing the stripe here for the Spartans is Foster Loyer, a surprising miss. He's always pretty solid from the line as Joey Hauser checks back in. And Foster Loyer will have some key minutes down the stretch here because Rocket Watts, the normal starting point guard for Michigan State, has fouled out. So Loyer with the chance to be a hero here off the bench. He will knock down one. Both teams in the penalty from here on out. Let's see Abilene Christian and what they have drawn up with 30 seconds left to play and 24 seconds left to shoot. They'll go inside of their best offensive player. This is Colton Cole, who has a double-double here tonight, but the miss is forced. And Foster Loyer will have one more chance to ice it here, up by 3. No more shot clock left in the ball game. Loyer with a chance to be the hero coming off the bench and filling the shoes of Rocket Watts, and he gets the one he needed. And so, the virtual March Madness tournament, not too bad on its picks so far today, huh? They got another team right, well, seed I guess you could say, since I messed up the playing game, but the 11th seeded Michigan State Spartans, they're the placeholder for UCLA, and they're gonna have a Sweet 16 trip in their horizon as Colton Cole with that double-double, not enough however, as Joe Pleasant, one of the better players for Abilene Christian, only shot 4 of 12. Now, the last matchup of Michigan's region, we got the 2-seeded Alabama Crimson Tide, who had some struggles taking down the 15-seeded Iona Gales. They'll be matching up against the 7-seeded Yukon Huskies, who took care of business against Maryland. James Bouknight had a 30-plus point performance. Even though in the real game he got shut down by the Terps, he was a star in the first game. And as you saw there, Yukon, they made the game's first 2 baskets, taking a 5-0 lead, but you could say that was their one shining moment as they got absolutely destroyed by Alabama from there on out. 97-53, Alabama looking like a completely different team here in the second round as they had to fend off the Gales of Iona in the first round. But here in the second, they had 4 players in double figures, including 27 from Jaden Shackelford, 21 from the Villanova transfer, Javon Quinterly. And meanwhile, looking at UConn's box score, it was pretty ugly from top to bottom, as RJ Cole only shot 3 of 13, Jalen Wally 3 of 10, and James Bouknight almost held scoreless tonight, 1 for 6. Wow, what a performance on the defensive side of the floor by the Crimson Tide. So moving on to the Baylor Bears region, they're going to face the 9th seeded Wisconsin Badgers. So 2 games from the first round that the virtual tournament did successfully pick correctly. So Baylor, let's see if they look just as dominant as they did in the real tournament, and they open up the game up 39-9. And from then on out, it was all Baylor here, as Wisconsin, I had that pick right in the first round just because they were the most experienced team from the Big Ten Conference. But they get absolutely smoked by the Baylor Bears in the second round, 81-52. So the tournament stays, or the virtual tournament I should say, stays pretty hot here, getting another team right successfully here in the Sweet 16. And even though Mark Vidal and Matthew Mayer, 2 starters on the Bears, didn't play all that well, they still hung 90-plus points on the Wisconsin Badgers' tough defense. Meanwhile, Brad Davis, the 2-guard, led the Badgers with 15, and the Ohio State transfer Micah Parter had 12. And thus, we jump to the next matchup as the 5-seeded Villanova Wildcats taking on the Mean Green in North Texas, the 13th seed from Baylor's region. 2 more games that the computer did get right. Very interesting here. And if the computer wants to stay hot, they'll take Villanova. But Mean Green of North Texas, they had a huge and one by their point guard, James Reese, to put them over the edge against Purdue, just like in real life. But Villanova, they're perfectly healthy. They have Colin Gillespie and Amir Cosby-Roundtree, two very important pieces for the Cats that did not participate in the real tournament due to injury. But it doesn't seem to be mattering on the hardwood very much, as the Mean Green, they look very good here, and they have a 1-point lead with 1:56 left to go here in the final period of play. And after a couple empty possessions from each side, we'll dwindle this clock down to a minute left as James Reese operates inside the painted area. No good there. He had that huge and one on Purdue to put UNT over the edge. So let's see how North Texas defends with a 1-point lead. They're one of the best defensive teams in the entire bracket. No good from Gillespie, but Jeremiah Robinson Earl is there to clean up the mess. He's going to be a solid NBA player in a couple years from now, as North Texas, and they got their backs against the walls all of a sudden due to not closing down the interior. 40 seconds left as Reese receives the inbound, and even though he's had some late game heroics, it's actually been Javion Hamlet, the starting small forward for North Texas, who has led North Texas in scoring in their first round game against Purdue and here tonight against Villanova. But instead, Reese will operate at the controls for North Texas down the stretch, as he tries to do it again just like he did against Purdue. That one's sent back by Jeremiah Robinson Earl, and that was definitely a clean block. Wow, what a rotation by J.R.E. He sent that one back with some conviction, and he got all ball. Perfectly executed there by the Wildcats big fella. Now Gillespie will step to the line. He's been a little cold down the stretch. For instance, when we first hopped into this game off of simulating, you guys saw that I took a couple seconds off the clock because of some empty possessions. Well, Gillespie was a big reason for that. He's cold, but he has a chance to make it all right here at the line, but he can only manage 1 for 2. 84-82, Villanova up a single possession as they try to lock down North Texas one final time and avoid any more late game heroics by the Mean Green, and try not to have a replication of what Purdue did in the first round game. So under 10 seconds left to play, here comes Reese. He'll pull and knock one down, forcing overtime. North Texas and James Reese do it again. Reese with his own Cinderella story, as we're knotted up at 84 pieces. We're going to hop into overtime, and something happened that I was not expecting. Take a look at North Texas. 6 unanswered points to begin the overtime period, and from then on out, it would be all Mean Green. They took this game pretty emphatically, outscoring Villanova 19-3 in the final period of play. They could not miss. And North Texas will take down another power school en route to their first Sweet 16 appearance in school history. Colin Gillespie, he had 27, but it took him 27 shots. Meanwhile, just like in the Purdue game, Javion Hamlet with a monster performance, but it was James Reese down the stretch with the shot to put them over the top. So it looks like North Texas found the key to success. Ride Javion Hamlet and let James Reese take over at the end of games. Unreal. So North Texas will move on to the Sweet 16. And I'm definitely excited to see if the Mean Green can replicate their magical performances against the #1 seed in their bracket, the Baylor Bears. So now, let's head to the 3-seeded Arkansas Razorbacks matchup against the 11-seeded Utah State Aggies. The Aggies took down Mac McClung and the Texas Tech Red Raiders thanks to their holding down of the interior down the stretch and their ability to hold on to the ball and not force themselves into mistakes. But Arkansas, with their up-tempo style of play, they make a lot of teams very uncomfortable. And Utah State, a very good team in the half court, they were just not prepared for this run and gun style of play from Arkansas. 91-75 as the Razorbacks move on to the Sweet 16 thanks to 42 points from Moses Moody. Oh my goodness, what a performance. And he was also helped out with 14 from JT Note, who had a great tournament in real life. And even though Justin Smith, one of the best players on Arkansas and by far their best big guy, didn't play particularly well, that didn't knock Arkansas off their stride one bit. Wow, Moses Moody, that might be the best performance in the tournament we've seen all virtual March Madness long. Meanwhile, Niemies Quita still had 18 and 10, although he shot under less than 50%. Justin Bean had a double-double. Not a bad game from Utah State as a whole, they just looked overwhelmed. Now, a matchup against two teams that the virtual tournament did not pick correctly. The number 2 seeded Ohio State Buckeyes against the Virginia Tech Hokies, the 10th seeded Hokies. They took down Florida pretty handily in the first round. Meanwhile, Ohio State made quick work of Oral Roberts. So two games, or this is actually a game that I did not pick correctly in the tournament. This is the exact same matchup I had in my bracket. And even though I'm an Ohio State fan, I am a realist, I am unbiased. I actually had them losing this game against VTech in my bracket. So all in all, the loss to Oral Roberts didn't hurt me too bad, but we're going to be in for another nail-biting finish here. Again, a lot of great games here in the round of 32, knotted up at 59 apiece. Meanwhile, Kive Aluma handles the ball here for VTech. He had a monster game against Florida in the first round. And Zed Key, the freshman backup center for the Buckeyes, he's trying to body up Aluma here in the post, as the freshman is being tacked with trying to stop the Hokies' best player, and he will be forced to foul. Zed Key getting a quick breather for Kyle Young and EJ Liddell, the two starting big guys for Ohio State, as Key checks out after Luma knocks down 2 free throws. So Kyle Young and Liddell will check back in, along with CJ Walker, who checks in for Dwayne Washington. And Walker, he will man the attack, bringing the ball out with 40 seconds left to go, 20 seconds left to shoot, as Justice Suing, the California transfer, he'll give it back to TJ Walker, who's a transfer from Florida State. And now Ohio State will have to operate quickly with 5 seconds left to shoot. This one will rotate to Liddell. Now to Justin Arns, the best spot-up shooter for the Buckeyes. That one will be off target, but Justice Suing will get it back. With 10 seconds left to operate, we see Kyle Young at the high post. The senior will give it to Liddell. Now out to Justin Arns. 3 seconds left for the tie. No good, not even close from Arns. And a long outlet pass that was nearly picked off by CJ Walker, but the Florida State transfer cannot pick it off. So, stepping to the line, VTech with a chance to take this game. It'll be 2 shots for Dre Davis of the Hokies, and he only has 4 points up to this point, but he sinks the first one, and this one is to put the nail in the coffin. 6 seconds left. Rebounding the miss will be Kyle Young. One last chance today, and what is Kyle Young doing? They have a timeout left, but the Buckeyes don't take it, and Young is forced to throw up a prayer, and I don't really know what happened here. Kyle Young missed the half-court heave, and the ball just decided somehow it was going to sit on the stanchion of the basket, and I actually let the recording go for like 10-15 minutes, and this is what I saw. Yeah, one of the weirdest glitches in 2K, so I just decided to pause the game and look at the stats from here. Nonetheless, VTech will have a chance to participate in the Sweet 16 as they try to go to battle against the red-hot shooting Arkansas Razorbacks. And I don't really know what to say as an Ohio State fan after witnessing what I just saw. We had a timeout left there at the end, but Kyle Young, I actually looked at the replay booth, and Kyle Young had CJ Walker open down the floor. He missed him and shot the half-court shot instead. Don't really know what all that was about. And they also had a timeout anyway, so I'm not really sure what in the world I just witnessed, but regardless, it was cool to see Ohio State play, at least, even if it wasn't a loss here in the virtual tournament. So moving on to Illinois' region, the final region we'll be recapping today here in the round of 32. Let's see if the 2K Sim engine can replicate Loyola's magic they always have here in the March Madness tournament. And unlike real life, Illinois in this game actually got off to a very hot start, 29-17 in the first quarter, but then Loyola comes storming back, taking a lead with 3 minutes left to go. Illinois feeling the pressure of the Ramblers' magic, and Loyola will actually have a 1-point lead with less than 2 minutes left to go. Cameron Quetrig, the flashy senior center who was one of the last players they still have from that Final Four run back in 2017, he'll inbound. Lucas Williamson, no good, but Williams is there to put in the second chance basket. So Loyola Chicago up by 3 with 1:49 left to go as the virtual March Madness tournament tries to make it another correctly picked team in the Sweet 16 as Trent Frazier tries to go to battle inside, and Cameron Krutwig comes out of nowhere for his 3rd block of the contest. And just like in real life, Krutwig went to battle against Kofi Cockburn and he still had a great game. Now Lucas Williamson will have the favor returned on him by Kofi. The 7-footer, 290-pound big guy, he remains step for step with Williamson. And then on the other end, now DeMonte Williams is blocked, forcing a jump ball, and unfortunately we all know 2K. Even though I set the possession arrow rule here in the My League just like in college ball, it still wants to do a jump ball, so we'll just play pretend and say that Loyola had the possession arrow. So they'll take over with a 3-point lead as Lucas Williamson will pull up a tough Baby J in the face of DeMonte Williams, and Williams, one of the best defenders in the Big Ten. That's going to be a tough ask. So Illinois still with a chance as Trent Frazier, he works the ball to the left block, and that one is defended perfectly. Illinois ice cold down the stretch. Loyola actually #1 in the nation in least points allowed, not just in the tournament but in the nation. Unbelievable. I actually didn't know that stat until just around tournament time, as Lucas Williamson, he's been the best offensive threat for the Ramblers tonight, and they would continue their winning ways here in the tournament. The magic of Loyola continues. No matter if it's reality or in make-believe, they will give the top programs a run for their money as they make the Sweet 16 here in the virtual tournament. 22 from Lucas Williamson tonight. Braden Norris also had 16, and Cameron Krutwig with 14 and 15, 3 blocks for the big fella. Meanwhile, Kofi Cockburn still had a pretty solid night, 20 and 10, but Ayo Dosunmu with only 10 and 6, 4 13 shooting. Trent Frazier was really bad there down the stretch, and meanwhile, Adam Miller and DeMonte Williams, 2 3-and-D players for Illinois who always seem to be on, they both were combined 0 for 5 shooting. So let's move on to see who will face Loyola in the second round. We have Oklahoma State against Tennessee. And the virtual tournament did not get the Oregon State upset correct. They had Tennessee actually beating the Beavers pretty good. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State was picked correctly as the Cowboys hung a lot of points up on Liberty in the first round game. And here I was pretty surprised to see that, well, Oklahoma kept it pretty close to begin with. But the more time we tick off the clock here, Tennessee will take this game, and pretty handily, I might add. They approach 100 points, and they will get into triple figures as they take down the Cowboys 102-80, and it wasn't the fault of Cade Cunningham at all, as he still played like a potential #1 overall pick. 38 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, although he did shoot 17-37. And meanwhile, Ferron Flavors Jr., he's actually Cunningham's backcourt mate. Meanwhile, he has one of the best names I've ever heard in sports, Ferron Flavors. What a name that is. He actually was held to a off night. Meanwhile, Yves Pons had a great game, and Santiago Vescovi, who was key in surviving Oregon State in the first round, he had another great night against the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Now we move on to the 6 versus 11 game. San Diego State against Morehead State, who narrowly scraped out a win against West Virginia, and freshman sensation Johnny Broome, who won Ohio Valley Conference Newcomer of the Year in real life. He absolutely smoked West Virginia, but he's going to have a tough task. He has to go to battle against the Mountain West Player of the Year, Matt Mitchell. And obviously, as you can see here, Morehead State kept it competitive for a little while, but the Aztecs ran away with it here in the second half. Mitchell with 21, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. He stuffed the stat sheet tonight. And Jaden Shackle had 19 and 5. Overall, a very dominant performance for San Diego State. It's been very interesting to see their development, because last year, obviously, COVID canceled the March Madness tournament, but going into the tournament, the Aztecs were one of the best offensive teams in the country, and this year they've become one of the best defensive teams in the entire bracket. And Johnny Broome only shot 7 of 27, so his Cinderella story ends prematurely. So, last game of the entire episode of the second round, we have the second-seeded Houston Cougars trying to replicate their Final Four performance in real life, taking on the 7th-seeded Clemson Tigers, and Clemson off to a pretty decent start. Houston on the ropes here a little bit, as they only managed to score 30 points in the first half. But as you can see, Clemson's offense going ice cold down the stretch. Wow. In the final 5 minutes, they were outscored 24-4, and there was a reason for that. 76-50, Houston survives to take on San Diego State in the second round, Marcus Sasser. He had only 10 in DeJon Giroux, so those are the two best players for the Cougars. They both didn't play their best, but they still managed to take this game by over 20 points, and a big reason for that was Amir Sims with only 5 points. He is the best player for the Clemson Tigers, yet he fouled out pretty early on. As you can see here, I'll scroll over to show you the proof. 5 personals for Amir Sims. He had an early exit. So the round of 32 comes to an end here in the virtual March Madness tournament. Just like last time, the teams in red, those are all the games that we got through today. It's been pretty interesting. Some games, some regions rather, the March Madness tournament has nailed, such as taking 3 out of 4 teams in the West region, looking pretty good in the Midwest as well. They got 2 out of 4 there. And in the South, they nailed Baylor and Arkansas. Yet in the East region, all hell seems to be breaking loose as St. Bonaventure, UNC Greensboro. One of those teams will have a shot at an Elite 8 berth. Pretty crazy, right? And that's just the fun of doing the March Madness here in simulation. You never know what Cinderella stories you're going to get. So, when you see me next, we're going to be taking down the Sweet 16 games you see before you and possibly hopping into the Elite 8. I might do both rounds in the same video, probably will. We'll see how we're doing on time, as this one kind of went a little bit longer than I wanted, but still, I hope you enjoyed. Hope to see you next time when we hop back into the virtual March Madness tournament. Stay tuned, everybody.